Good evening. My name is Tracy Craig, and welcome to the Water Board's community meeting on the draft remedial action plan for the former Ford Aeronutronics property, and specifically for 1 Ford Road. First of all, thank you for having us. If you're cold, please sit closer to the heaters and warm up a little bit. When you came in, I hope you signed in and got this presentation that we're giving tonight. Tonight, Jessica Law, who's over here, will be presenting on the study that we've done and then also the proposed plan to clean up contamination in soil gas, and groundwater. We have about a 20-minute presentation, and then it's followed by questions and answers. And specifically, we'd love to hear your comments about the proposed cleanup plan. We're in a formal public comment period. You probably received a fact sheet in the mail, and we'd like to get comments by March 15th, I think, is what we're asking. You can email them, write them, or call them in to Jessica, and that information is also in this packet. So presentation is about 20 minutes. You can stop for clarifying questions, but we think most of the questions that you'll have will be answered throughout the presentation. Then we'll open it up for public comments, and then we'll actually open it up for questions and answers, and then we'll open it up for formal public comment. So I think with that, any questions? No? Okay. Thank you for coming out. We know it's cold, and really you have a wonderful venue, so we want to hold all our meetings here, okay? But yeah, we'll have to sit on each other's lap, so no. Anyway, thank you for having us, and really thanks for coming out and attending when it's so cold. Okay, Jessica.
So tonight's presentation is going to just give a recap of kind of where we've been with the assessment, the risk assessment that preceded or that got us to getting the feasibility study. We're going to talk about the remediation process, go over what the remedial action objectives are, which are the cleanup goals, then talk about the feasibility study and the remedial action plan, what the remedial alternatives are, and go over what the public comment period entails, how you guys can submit any comments you may have for the draft feasibility study and remedial action plan, what the next steps are, and then we'll go into the question and answer session. So just to recap, the vapor intrusion activities that have happened over the last couple of years, we've collected a lot of data over that time, and that data that's been collected is what was used in the Human Health Risk Assessment report. And there was the one that was conducted for the 1 Ford Road community itself. We've been doing them for the individual communities, but we're also looking at the data as a whole. The main conclusion was that it identified that there is some vapor intrusion occurring at a couple of properties, and that there is the potential for future risk, meaning if the building foundation degrades, you get more cracks in the foundation, something like that, concentrations increase, that there's a potential for future vapor intrusion. From those conclusions, the Water Board requested 2 reports. One was the draft feasibility study and remedial action plan that we're here to talk about tonight. The other one was to conduct long-term indoor air monitoring. And some of you may have already, have you guys sent out those letters yet for the long-term? Okay, so soon you're going to be seeing, for those that fall within the indoor air investigation area, Ford is going to be sending the kind of longer term indoor air monitoring plan and what category you fall into as far as frequency of monitoring. But for the draft feasibility study and remedial action plan that we're here to talk about tonight, that was submitted on August 5th last year, and we provided comments to that report on December 17th. So before I talk about the draft feasibility study and remedial action plan, I just want to talk about the remediation process. And I think most of you attended that meeting we just had on the beginning of February. So I'm not going to go into super detail on this because it's literally repeat, but it's still important to show all the steps. And we had started with that site investigation, collected that data, were able to get that risk evaluation, which led to the preparation of that draft feasibility study, remedial action plan. It presented remedial alternatives I'm going to talk about in a little bit, and based on the recommended remedial alternative, that's where we're going to get into that current stage of that public comment period. So that way you guys can ask questions, provide your feedback, comments to it. And then from there, we have that remedial design. That takes about 6 months because of permitting and stuff like that. And then there's remedy implementation. And that's all in the details of once the feasibility study and remedial action plan are finalized. And then we can get more specific details on those timeframes towards the end. So for the draft feasibility study and remedial action plan, this is a report. It proposes specific remedial action objectives. And again, those are the cleanup goals for the remediation. This report conducts a feasibility study to evaluate all of the different remedial technologies that are out there. Then it identifies and evaluates the remedial alternatives based on that feasibility study, and it proposes a remedial alternative to the water board for our approval and for public review and comment. So the cleanup goals for this addresses each particular impacted media. It's groundwater, soil, soil vapor, indoor air. So for groundwater, the main goal for that is that there is complete delineation. We know the full extent of groundwater impacts and that the concentrations in groundwater are decreasing from when the former facility actually operated here and they closed it and they collected all those initial groundwater samples to the existing wells now, which are located just outside of One Ford Road. Are there any inside? I don't know. 2 inside. There's 20 plus years worth of data, and we've seen decreasing trends. And so we need a couple more data points to support that. And we want to make sure with that cleanup goal that contaminated groundwater is going to reach drinking water standards in a reasonable time frame. And when I talk about groundwater, I'm talking about shallow. It's not your drinking water. Drinking water is safe and fine. It is not impacted. It meets all state and federal requirements, but we still treat all groundwater as having beneficial uses, meaning at some point in the future, if the need happened and they could drill a drinking water well. And so that's always the cleanup goals for any kind of open environmental case with the water boards. And the water board concurred with this cleanup objective for groundwater. When it comes to soil, we use those environmental screening levels that I've talked about that the San Francisco Bay Water Board has developed. They have set them using protective assumptions. And so should contaminated soil be encountered, it's not here. This area got their soil closure from the extensive remediation that occurred back in the 90s, but we still want to have cleanup goals for that. So we concurred with that. When it's soil gas, which is the primary reason we're all together with this vapor intrusion investigation, the draft feasibility study proposed site-specific screening levels, and that was based on that deeper soil gas that's collected at 5 and 15 feet. There's been a lot of data collected, and there's been some site-specific screening levels, and so that's what was proposed. We had a comment that requested an evaluation of subslab soil gas. So the soil gas that's right below the foundation of the home that's been detected, we wanted that taken into consideration with the cleanup goals as well, along with those site-specific screening levels. And then indoor air, we're using the ESLs, and we concurred with that. And then when it comes to these cleanup objectives, they can be a numerical value and they can also be descriptive, which they typically are. And the primary objective is that these cleanup goals need to be protective of human health and the environment. So then for the draft feasibility study, the feasibility study evaluates the different remedial technologies based on the ability to implement the technology, the effectiveness, as well as cost. And the report looked at approximately 20 different remedial technologies for cleaning up soil, soil gas, groundwater, and indoor air. And then based on the initial evaluation, they retained 7 technologies that were feasible for implementation. So, the remedial alternatives, they selected, there was 3 that were proposed. The first remedial alternative is no action. And this is submitted in every single feasibility study remedial action plan for comparison purposes. And then the next one, which was remedial alternative 2, that included groundwater extraction, soil vapor extraction, and indoor air monitoring. And then alternative 3 was monitored natural attenuation, meaning we're going to look at the groundwater and soil vapor plumes and make sure concentrations are decreasing, do indoor air monitoring, and then on a location specific based on if vapor intrusion is occurring, either soil vapor extraction or subslab depressurization. So the 3 remedial alternatives were compared to this, these 9 evaluation criteria. And it goes into 3 groups. And we have that threshold criteria. And both of those, the overall protection of human health and the environment, as well as compliance with state and federal requirements, have to be met. This is usually the first step that throws out that alternative 1 of no action. The next one is the primary balancing criteria. And those 5 criteria just are used to weigh the major trade-offs among the different alternatives. And so that's your long-term effectiveness, reduction of toxicity, mobility, and volume through treatment, short-term effectiveness, implementability, as well as cost. And then the final one is the modifying criteria. And this one is, addresses the regulatory acceptance as well as public acceptance. And community input and acceptance is especially important to the water board, and it is mentioned in our statutes regarding environmental cleanup. So the recommended alternative within the draft feasibility study and remedial action plan was alternative 3. And it was based on that evaluation criteria. And we'll go into details on those. So we have the monitored natural attenuation, and that just allows the natural ongoing processes to decrease the groundwater and soil gas concentrations. There's not active remediation, but monitoring does occur to ensure those decreasing concentrations are happening. And this would require the installation of additional groundwater monitoring wells and actually a couple of additional soil vapor probes. The next one would be the indoor air monitoring, and that is to ensure, in general, we're not seeing vapor intrusion occurring. There's the couple that are just above what we consider acceptable risk levels, and this is where the indoor air monitoring is going to come in to make sure those conditions don't change. Then there's soil vapor extraction and subslab depressurization, and that is dependent on vapor intrusion actually occurring at homes. And so if soil vapor extraction was to be implemented, which in all reality, the soil gas concentrations that remain within one Ford road are not high enough for soil vapor extraction. It is not going to really be effective. It's an option, and it'll address what's below ground, but based on the pilot tests that have occurred in various parts of this project, one was just in Bay Ridge Park, one was over in Sea Island Community, and the other one was just outside of Newport North apartment homes. Not a lot of mass was removed, not a lot of contamination was removed, and the concentrations there are at least an order of magnitude higher. So the concentrations here added 0 to them, and they still did not pull out much. So SVE is probably not the most effective approach. And then there's subslab depressurization, and that just creates a negative pressure beneath the foundation of a building and redirects vapors through piping to above the roof line to address vapor intrusion. So these figures never show well on a presentation, and we have them behind us in poster form, but the big kind of point here, the yellow is the proposed additional points. The pink are all the existing probes that are here. Some are groundwater monitoring wells, some are soil vapor probes. We have a couple posters behind us that are, if you want to really look at and we can talk to easier, that's a good option. Yeah, this is the boundary. So right here is the gate. Yeah. And then I think we're right here. Yes. Yeah. Whoops, sorry. Oh, okay. And so these buildings that show up here, but not down here, that would be the homes that have been identified within the indoor air investigation area. So if a home isn't showing up, because we have homes all, throughout over here and down here, they're just, the soil gas concentrations have not been detected at a level that warrants the indoor air investigation. So then that just brings us, as far as the remediation process goes, to the public comment period. So here, that allows just an opportunity for public input to the proposed remedy prior to finalizing the FS wrap. I want to point out, really that these are conceptual plans. As far as the boring locations or the proposed monitoring well and soil vapor probe locations, those may adjust slightly. And yeah, we want to hear comments that you may have. They can be, I know Tracy mentioned it at the beginning, we're going to take public comments tonight, but then you can also email or mail them to me, and we'll incorporate that and provide also a responsiveness summary.
And Jessica, your address is in the fact sheet that's in the handout. So just want to point that out, as well as all of the information, GeoTracker, Ford's website, lots of other information. So you got this if you need to refer to that for further information.
And so on the, slide 16 here has all of that. It's got my email. My phone number is missing. You guys can call me too. It's on all the invites. I'm more than happy to take the verbal questions, but if you write it, it's just easier to make sure that I've got it for accuracy. The comment period started February 14th. It goes through March 15th. Again, we're taking those comments tonight. Here's my contact info is another way for you to send them out to me. When it comes to next steps, we're going to finalize, Ford needs to finalize the FS wrap. They have until it's 45 days following the close of the public comment period, which puts a due date for that final FS wrap of April 29th. Then we will review and approve that FS wrap. I think the next step would then be the remedial design and implementation plan. It's the work plan for conducting the next steps. And it's Ford would, on behalf of Ford, will work with the One Ford Road community in that development, just to maintain communication, transparency, and then it gets submitted to us. Probably summertime, and then we will review it, approve it, and then that's when the permitting starts, and then there'll be the groundwater monitoring well and soil gas probe installation. If necessary, a subslab depressurization pilot test, and I'll let Mike and Daniela talk a little more on that after this, and then conducting the long-term monitoring. This is where you can get the additional information. I know the handouts that they provided have all that contact info. The GeoTracker, which is the state's database website for this project, it has all of the current vapor intrusion assessment data, but as well as everything dating back into the 90s. There's a lot of documents there, groundwater documents, in addition to all the vapor intrusion assessment. The Water Board also has an email notification subscription, so that's what we use for notifying of the larger public meetings, not the community-specific ones. We also have a Water Board webpage that you can get some additional info. Ford has their site-specific website, an 800 number, and then we keep copies of these reports at the library. And so then that takes us to the Q&A.
So a couple things I realized I failed to do. So with us tonight, Mike Barnes. I think everybody knows Mike. He's with Wood Environmental. What is it? Wood Environment and Infrastructure, which is Ford's consultant. Also Daniela, who's the engineer working on this project. Ford is not here tonight, so wanted to make that clear. Also wanted to let you know we are taping this, and it will be broadcast on a YouTube channel, and we'll put that on the Ford website. And we'll send it out to the HOA so they can send it to folks that didn't want to sit here in the cold tonight. That being said, the other thing I wanted to say is what we do with the public comments. I don't think we said too much about that. So when you give us comments, the Water Board will actually review and review those and look at them and decide if they're going to change the outcome or if they can make some changes. Right, Jessica? And then Wood will take that from there and finalize that draft RAP based on public comment. So you're not just commenting in comment, they'll actually be considered in making the final decision. And then the responsiveness summary is issued, and what that is it has every comment that we got and how the Water Board considered it in making a final decision on how to move forward with a cleanup plan for the area. So just wanted to be clear on that, and with that, I'll open it up for questions, followed by formal comments, if we will. So I'm going to give you the microphone, though, because it's, if you don't mind. So here you go.
So our house was tested a couple of years, maybe a couple of years ago or a year ago, I can't remember, and the levels were under the levels for any further action, I think. Are you going to continue testing houses that even though they passed the law?
So one of the things that the Water Board is asking to occur is even for those homes, because they had the 2 rounds of sampling, we require at least 2 seasonal sampling events before saying, okay, this home is in the all clear. But things may happen over time that may change that. It's not anticipated that that's going to happen, but we want to see the data to make sure if there's still the soil vapor plume, that vapor intrusion is not occurring.
So are you saying there will really never be an all clear because
There will be.
As you say, things may change,
Yeah.
even though you cleared, next year there may
Right.
be a
So
problem?
no, here we have a lot of data, and what we're seeing is there isn't a source necessarily that remains. And what is still present, whether it's contaminated groundwater in the soil vapor, the concentrations are decreasing, and eventually they're going to decrease to levels where there isn't a concern. And when we have sufficient data that says this hasn't changed, then we can issue the closures.
Do you have a wild estimate of when that'll be, or
No.
10 years?
Because
3
what it
years?
is it's the project as a whole, and so it depends on all these other communities as well.
If I can just add, one thing that we've been required to submit that we'll be submitting as soon as the winter season is over, which is next month or so, is we wrote a revised indoor air monitoring plan, which looks at all of the homes that have been sampled and takes into consideration the indoor air results from that particular property, the surrounding subsurface concentrations of the chemicals of concern, and then applies a sampling schedule to that particular home. So some homes may be requested to have their indoor air tested every 5 years or every 2 years or annually or every 6 months. And so there will be a revised indoor air monitoring plan letter that'll go out to every property telling you which category you fall under. Next month or so.
Thank you. Jessica, you mentioned in some of your earlier slides that the concern is the risk that may be created. And I appreciate your technical background, but can you give us the bottom line of what the risk is to humans living at One Ford Road?
Mm-hmm. So primarily what we're seeing from that risk assessment is it is right at that 1 in a million to 1 in 100,000 for a couple of homes increased risk of developing cancer over a lifetime of exposure. So if you're in your home 24 hours a day, 350 days out of the year, over a 26-year period, exposed to concentrations at or above this screening level, and we haven't seen them like in order or 2 orders of magnitude above the screening level. It's pretty close. And so that's where that stands. It's
What does that mean, pretty close?
pretty close to the screening level, so that 1 in a million increased risk after a lifetime. And that's only a couple of homes that we've seen that at. So in general, I guess the really simple answer to that would be the overall risk is really low, but it's not something that is so low we can walk away from and say, we don't need to monitor anymore and do nothing.
It sounds like there have been 2 houses so far that exceed the level of even minimal risk, and that's it.
That sounds about right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mike wants to add, he wants to clarify. Mike wants to clarify something, and then I'm happy to.
So I think what might be helpful is to compare this HOA with 2 of the other HOAs that are nearby, and that's Bay Ridge Park and Belcourt Terrace. So as Jessica indicated, the soil gas concentrations here are primarily, the higher concentrations are towards kind of the guard shack and everything to the north from here. In Bay Ridge Park and Belcourt Terrace, the soil gas concentrations are the highest we have in the entire site. And what the alternative that we've recommended there is actual soil vapor extraction. So a system that is it's like a giant vacuum that pulls out the soil gas from beneath the ground. And that system runs throughout the entire HOA for the most part. So it's a much more extensive system because we see vapor intrusion occurring at a number of homes in those HOAs. So what Jessica's trying to say is in this HOA, out of all of the homes that we've tested, we only have 2 homes that are above the environmental screening levels of long-term risk. Therefore, in combination with the lower soil gas concentrations, we're not proposing a soil vapor extraction. So it's a good thing. What we're going to do is take a more targeted approach where we are going to look more closely at the homes that are showing these elevated or above environmental screening levels and look at an approach that may be what's called a subslab depressurization system, which is specific to the home, where we hook up a system that basically eliminates the preferential pathway and off gases it to the side of the home and up the roof line.
And you had asked if those that have the exceedances have been notified. Yes. So anyone who has been offered indoor air sampling and has had their home tested, they get their results, and it goes directly to the homeowner and tenant if it is a rental property.
And if I can just add, it's never too late if you're in the investigation area to have your home tested.
And in the reason that I think it's important to note, we're seeing those higher concentrations at the northern side. There is historically when the former facility closed and they demoed everything, then they did a lot of very aggressive cleanup activities within here to make it to allow for the property to be rezoned from that industrial use to residential use. They had to meet all the standards at that time in the 90s. And so the cleanup overall was fairly effective. There's just these couple of areas still of concern, some residual soil gas concentrations, but none of the soil gas data suggests source was missed, that, something was left in place that is of concern. We're just not seeing that here.
There's so much information. I'll talk real loud. Can you hear me?
And I'll repeat it for you.
Okay, we'll repeat it too.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There's so much information. I've been on your website a bunch of times. It's pretty confusing. And you've done so much work on it. But is there any way, let's say you wanted to sell your house, or a mortgage lender says, oh my gosh, I need some more information. Can you get a one-line or a two-line letter from the water board or somebody saying, this is really not a problem? Or if it is, it's a 1 in a million every 300-year problem, that kind of a thing?
If the home
I
is
think that's what you're saying.
If the home has been tested, I have to confirm with my executive management, but typically providing a comfort letter if the home has been sampled the 2 times, that's not a problem. If the home hasn't been sampled, then, and it's within the indoor air investigation area, then that's another story.
And Ford's recommendation with respect to disclosure is if you've had your home tested, the results letter should be your disclosure statement. And I've talked to hundreds of prospective buyers and sellers and walked them through the letter in layman's terms so that they can understand it and make an informed decision.
Thank you.
So I'm going to number you 1 and then 2. Anybody else? And then 3 way in the back. So, oh, thank goodness I'm by the heat.
I know. So I've been on the website as well and couldn't find a specific list of what types of chemicals and substances you're looking for besides the TCE and PCE. Are there other heavy metals or chemicals that are on that list? And are fluoride or arsenic on that list as well?
So fluoride and arsenic are not on that list. Back in the day when they were doing all the initial assessment back in the 90s, they tested for metals, and that is part of that is what drove certain cleanup objectives, and that is not of concern right now. And so there is 9 primary contaminants of concern. It would be PCE, TCE, and then the additional breakdown products, and then 1,1-TCA and those breakdown products, because as these chemicals degrade, they can become a different chemical. And so we look at all of it. Even though that particular chemical may not have been used, we want to still monitor to make sure it doesn't show up.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? No? Okay.
Hi. I'm new around here, so we just moved in November. We didn't have any disclosure. This is basically the first I've heard of this. However, before we got the home we're in, we put an offer in on another home that did have some disclosure statement saying the levels were below action levels. So I don't know if the home we actually purchased just didn't disclose, or is there a way that I can find out?
So afterwards, talk to either myself or Mike, and we can, like I said, we have the figures in the back, and we can look at where you live and determine if you are in the investigation area or outside.
So, and I would add to that, we'll stay after if you have questions specific to your property. Happy to stay afterwards and talk about that. Also, you can call anytime, and I'm saying this primarily because we're being taped. You
Yeah.
can call Jessica, Mike, or Danielle at any time and ask questions specific to your property. You can call the 800 line. We'll get you in touch with them. So just want to make sure people know that as well.
And
Okay.
then for those that have just recently, I say recently, who have moved into the area and have, been finding out, like in your case, if you do fall within the indoor air investigation, we will coordinate we'll have you coordinate with Wood to do the indoor air sampling. Yeah.
Okay.
Or yeah, they can also provide, if the home was previously tested, they'll get you those result letters as well.
Okay. And here you go. Hi.
Hi. I was never approached to be tested, but I see by the red dots on the map, those were the homes that were tested. Is that correct?
No, so the red dots are the soil vapor probes, that we're using to monitor the extent of the soil vapor plume. It's the little black outlines that there's a house and that's a house. And Danielle is going to go get the figure that'll show it a little easier. So it's the green shading. So the yes. So yeah, right. Does that work? Is that hard to see? I know it is. These. No, actually, the green is the original identified indoor air investigation area. This green line and the purple line is the soil vapor plume that is at the screening level. So everything within exceeds the screening level where we want to have indoor air testing occur. And this really is the shape that it was when we first started, and now it's up to here. And so the soil vapor plume has really been decreasing, and this is good. And this is why the monitored natural attenuation really is the most appropriate remediation path forward for this community. So the pink.
So
Yeah.
should we approach someone to be tested if we haven't been?
So if you're within the indoor air investigation area, he will get you signed up. If you're outside the indoor air investigation area, then there's no need to have the home tested. There isn't the risk of vapor intrusion.
And I think I'll make this easy on you. Why don't you give me your name and number? We'll follow up with you tomorrow. I think that would be the easiest path forward instead of you having to call us since you've expressed interest. Okay. And then I think this gentleman was next, right? Number 4. That's okay. And then there's a woman up here that will be number 5. So here you go.
Hello. Okay, I guess you can hear me. So I'm a relatively new homeowner. Before we moved in, I was all over your website looking at the historical data, and since I'm kind of a geek engineer, I actually understood a lot of what you had. I actually understood a lot of what was there, and we bought a home that's kind of like the borderline, the green and white area, so forth. So I noticed that your reports go back several years with testing results. I assume that's going to continue forward, and therefore these maps with the plumes or the isotherms or whatever you want to call them are going to sort of move around over time. But I'm a little bit curious that the original remediation that was done when they developed the site, they probably did a decent job based on the standards at the time. And I'm wondering, since a lot of the sources were towards the south end, did they do just a really good job there and not so much in the other areas? Is there some historical? And secondly, if the One Ford Road area, if the plumes are quote unquote moving or reducing, are they also reducing on the neighboring properties to the north, or is it like our bad stuff's flowing downhill?
So that's what ultimately kind of happened, was the contaminated groundwater and soil vapor left the property in the two directions, to the north and to the south. And when they did all the cleanup was focused within this property, and it didn't reach outside of the property boundary. And that's why now we're going to be having the remedial efforts to the north and ultimately probably to the south. But for the most part, I think there's only a couple of soil gas probes on the south side where we have seen some increasing trends. I'm going off the top of my head. I haven't looked at those trend graphs in a little bit, but there is only, I skim over them every time Ford submits the semi-annual reports, and I look at them, and I want to say there was only those couple where we saw some increasing trends, but we weren't seeing vapor intrusion at that point, and so we were doing some additional investigation for those areas. Yeah, so groundwater leaves here in two directions, and in the all of the soil vapor probes on this map were strategically placed based on the historical operations. And you're right, you know, there was a lot of activities that occurred on the south side of the property, and I was expecting to see something as far as like soil gas concentrations, and it's just not present. The cleanup was effective. They did some excavations and soil vapor extraction, and it addressed the impacts. Yeah, which is why we also keep monitoring it. Was it something that we just missed? And it's just not there. So.
Okay. All right.
Would you mind telling us where the two homes that have the issues are?
I don't have those figures. It's on the risk assessment reports that we presented that in the July risk assessment meeting, the community specific meeting, and that's on both GeoTracker and the Ford website. So either location you can find the recording for that. And it talks about the areas where there were the exceedances.
Sorry.
Again, I'm going to make this easy on you. Put your name and number there, email, whichever your preferred contact is, and I'll get you that link and send you that information. Okay?
And one of the things that you'll
Gotcha.
notice on on these poster boards is that there is unique identifiers to each home. And that's because at the start of this vapor intrusion investigation, there was an overwhelming concern of people's privacy. And so we did not want to put addresses on there. We did not want to put people's names. None of the result letters have gone up to GeoTracker, the state database, because we want to respect people's privacy and their personal information. And so the data is all reported in the, at the time it was quarterly reports, but now they get submitted every 2 times a year, every 6 months. So the data gets reported up there, but it goes under these unique identifiers. So if you're curious and looking at data from here and the indoor air results, this is considered parcel 13. And so it's 13 point some digits. But yeah, we try to maintain a little bit of homeowner privacy with that.
Two homes in the same, are the two homes in the same area?
No.
Well, that's interesting too, because how could, if that's the case, you can't identify even what street they're on or something, because maybe we're on the same street. I mean, I would like to know if someone next door has the problem.
So when you look at the figures, I think it'll help. We'll have, Mike can contact you, or I can contact you, and we can share I can share my computer screen, and we can look over there and stuff that way from the risk assessment report.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Any,
I think yours. Oh.
Here, I'll bring this up there, and then I saw you.
No, it's going to get loud.
Okay, careful.
And one thing just to add about kind of that sporadic nature, we do encourage everyone who's in the indoor air investigation area to get tested, because the results from your next door neighbor are not necessarily indicative of what you may find in your home, because a lot of the issue can be dependent on the integrity of the building envelope. So whether there are cracks or penetrations. So, you know, it is the homes that are not necessarily next to each other is a little bit puzzling in one sense, but at the same time, it's so specific building by building and how the building is kind of operated and maintained that there's also kind of an explanation for that kind of sporadicness.
And that's why from the beginning we want everyone to get their homes that are within the indoor air investigation area to get their home tested, because like she's saying, some folks keep their windows open, some folks have different HVAC systems. As your home settles, you get additional cracks. There's all those different factors. And then for here, it isn't as puzzling just because this is the former facility. So there's still the little bit of residual areas within. And so that could also be part of the explanation for why they're not right next to each other.
Okay, so I just want to recognize you, then you, and then you again, just so people know they've been seen.
I'm sorry. Wouldn't, if your next door neighbor swimming stimulate whatever, if there was groundwater, soil contamination, would that not just encourage or increase your opportunity, the chance of spreading it further?
No, so I know that was a little soft, so I'll just repeat that. And the concern is if somebody puts in a swimming pool, is the, excavating out for that going to stir something up and create more of like a vapor intrusion issue? One, soil has been remediated and met all of the residential levels. We haven't seen any in any of the confirmation sampling that was done. Everything that exceeded that was dug up. Second, these are very volatile. So once they get to outdoor air, they dissipate very quickly and is not a problem. And then groundwater is 55 feet here below the ground surface. So you're not going to reach that and encounter that. But those are all things that we do consider as part of that risk evaluation and stuff. So those are things that have been considered.
So I heard that there are things that can affect the numbers, like dry cleaning clothes and paint and stuff. How do you find out what's what? How do you differentiate between that and
Yeah.
and
So that is one of the tricky components to vapor intrusion assessments, and why we collect those subslab soil vapor samples or have the perimeter, these probes placed kind of right next to the home if folks did not want to have that subslab probe in the garage. There have been times where the indoor air result didn't quite, it suggested maybe vapor intrusion was occurring, but the sample collected below the foundation said it's not coming from vapor intrusion, but they didn't identify an obvious indoor air source. So we have asked for samples to be collected, air samples to be collected from the sewer line, because that's a potential pathway. We have not seen that as a potential. And so we get multiple lines of evidence to support whether vapor intrusion is occurring or not. And we've gotten pretty, as an industry, savvy on what are those indoor air sources to be on the lookout for. And they have their, when Wood goes in and does the indoor air sampling, they've got a building survey and they are specifically looking for things. And they have a handheld monitor called a PID. And what it does is it looks for volatiles, and it'll beep at fairly low concentrations. I know one time it kind of alarmed a resident when, the nail polish and nail polish remover kind of triggered it to go. And so those little things.
Okay, don't say it until I get there.
how do you determine where to place the test units? Because I had mine placed in our bathrooms.
Yeah. So there's a couple points that we're looking at. We want to target the main living areas where folks spend most of the time, but we also ask that areas where there is floor penetrations, like the bathroom and the kitchen, to be targeted as well, because where those utilities and the sewer lines enter in can be a potential preferential pathway for vapors to get into a home. And so we want to target those as well. Even though you're not living in your bathroom 24/7, we want to know if that's an entry point.
One more question?
Okay. No, I felt also that the first were unclear of where to place them, but then they seem to be placed the same places subsequently. And I'm just wondering if you look into something like that as well. If they're placed in the right spot in the house.
Mike, do you want to address that? I'm thinking you do.
So generally when we have the indoor air teams come back, we try to place the samples in the same places they were before, and that's just kind of in terms of like scientific principles. You're getting more data. It can be more compared to previous rounds. But what we do when we're initially selecting the locations, we are, like Jessica mentioned, targeting these various living space, a place with preferential pathways like a bathroom or a kitchen. We get them on both floors. What we're trying to do is get decent coverage around the house. We generally, in One Ford Road, I believe, set up about 4 samples per home. Sometimes there's a duplicate, so sometimes even 5, but those would be in the same location. And for the size of the home, that's really great coverage. If you look elsewhere where indoor air sampling is, the number of samples per square footage is like we have a much higher concentration of samples, so we feel like we're getting good coverage across the home. We have had situations where the question of like, how can you tell whether it's vapor intrusion or not? And we look for different things and we can't identify something super concrete, like a really good reason. Oh, it was caused by this hobby glue that we know has VOCs in it, and then we remove the hobby glue and the concentrations are, reduced. So when it's unclear like that, occasionally when we consult with the water board, we will potentially add another sample location if we think, we don't have good enough coverage, or we think there may be a reason that a different room in the home. But generally, I would say with the 4 samples per home of this size, we've got a very good understanding of the air inside the home.
Okay. I think you had a question, and then I want to do a time check after that with folks.
So I just had a follow-up question regarding the 2 substances that I had asked about. Is there a place where I can find a comprehensive list of everything that was tested for, every substance, every chemical that was included in these tests? Because what is of concern to me may be different from other residents. And for me specifically, it was arsenic and fluoride, considering that there may have been semiconductors that could have caused the arsenic levels to go up, or fluoride ion cleaning of aviation parts.
So they're on GeoTracker. You can find the 1995, I think it's the remedial investigation report, and we can email you the link. But it does look at that. And it's an old document, and so I'm trying to remember if all of the tables and figures and attachments are included in the one that's uploaded or not. It is. So we have those that does look at all of those things.
So that was 1995 was the last time there was a broader test done of lots of different substances?
That's when they would have done that to help with the remedial design, and really looking at, because they went building specific and targeted. Okay, this building did, testing. This one had the labs. This one did R&D. This one did production, and looked at what are the chemicals or contaminants of concern, and tested for that. And so that document went through each area of concern and then collected samples and brought all of those up.
Okay.
So if you get that list from 1995, will it be the same chemicals that you've studied?
No, it'll be different because
But then that's her question. Can she get a copy of the toxins that you studied here?
So we have the current list based on the contaminants of concern that are still present. And then the other ones that were tested back in the 90s during
Right.
the cleanup, they have been ruled out and addressed and already remediated. What we're testing for now is what are still of concern.
Her question was, can she get a copy of that, what you're testing now? And I'd be interested in it too.
Of course. Yeah, it's in all the work plans, and it lists out what the contaminants of concern are.
So, and I think I'm going to get your name and number, and we'll send you both. Yeah.
It concerns me that there are certain chemicals that were tested 20 years ago that are not being tested for again because they were ruled out. And these are substances that sometimes
Right.
are unstable and can,
So
the levels can change.
So and I guess I should take a step back. When it comes to soil gas, so all the pink squares, everything that's collected below the ground, we look at all volatile organic compounds, so everything that's going to volatilize. And from that, it's been reduced to what's been detected in either soil gas or indoor air. And I think that's the list. And yeah. So metals don't volatilize, with the exception of mercury. Elemental mercury does, but that's not a concern here. And then fluoride does not as well. That would be something that would be in like drinking water. That's an additive with the city, if I recall correctly.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to do a quick time check. We're in questions and answers. Do we have any other questions? Because I'd like to open this for public comment if you'd like to have formally comment. Or we can keep going with questions and answers. So, okay, hang in.
In my house a long time ago. I don't know when, but it was in the garage. But I don't know if we have. I am not very good talking.
You are very good at talking.
And and I don't know if I have the results or they send us the results or
Talk to him. He'll get you the results.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if you're unclear on your results, or if you have a property-specific question, we'll stay after and talk with you about that. We have maps back there, and we'll also
And
call you if you'd like. You just need to call us, and we'll set up a time to talk.
And with the contaminants of concern and how we narrowed that list down, we had asked back in 2017 Ford to prepare a conceptual site model to look at all of the site history, all the data that's been collected, to compare it to the current screening levels and standards and what we know now. And that's why the vapor intrusion assessment began, because there were samples collected back in like 2006, 2008, and the general industry knowledge of vapor intrusion at the time was different, and the interpretation of the soil gas results said vapor intrusion isn't of concern, and that was based on what our environmental industry knew of how vapor intrusion occurred. Fast forward, we've learned more about some of these chemicals, how they behave below the ground, and that's where that conceptual site model identified this data gap that warranted the additional investigation. And that's really what got it all started. But we have looked at all of the historical, and again, why we the water board continue to want soil gas samples collected for the whole suite. We want to look at the whole thing, so that way if something appears, we know, and we can address it accordingly.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Then I think I'll open it up for formal public comment, which means that would be a comment that would go in the responsiveness summary. And let me raise your hand if you'd like to comment.
But I will say, I know this was a lot of information, and for any of those comments, take it home. If you have additional questions that you think of tomorrow, the next day, and the next week, or whatever, you can reach out to myself or Mike. Call the Ford Information Hotline, and they'll direct you to the right person. And we're happy to answer questions and take comments that way too.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, so much. I do want to say that our next meeting, we haven't calendared it yet.
We haven't calendared it
So
yet.
the next thing that will go out will be that responsiveness summary, and after that, we'll probably send something out about the remedial design implementation plan, which is the guts of the plan, the kind of engineering specifics of it. So I'd like to thank everybody and go home and get warm. Yeah. All right, and again, we're back here if you have questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You were a very generous audience.